Part 7. Rebuilding the metronome. Restoring coherence in a high-velocity world. A society does not collapse when it becomes fragmented, anxious, or digitally overclocked. It collapses when it loses the ability to reestablish synchrony. The core thesis of this series has been straightforward. All societies are synchronization devices. Their health depends on coherence, not ideology. Digital hypersynchronization has broken the natural rhythm of signal digestion and stabilization. The challenge is not moral or political, it is metabolic. Thus, Part 7 is not a manifesto, it is an engineering blueprint how to rebuild a metronome that can function under modern velocity without collapsing the human organism. Everything below follows one rule. Coherence must become an engineering property, not an emergent accident. Coherence requires friction. The modern world removed all natural friction. Geographical separation, time delays, scarcity of voices, social accountability, limited signal density. This produced unsustainable hypersynchrony. To rebuild the metronome, societies must restore friction, but deliberately. Slower decision cycles, buffered communication spaces, structured delay between signal and reaction, mandatory cooling phases before collective recognition. This is not nostalgia, it is neurobiological necessity. Coherence requires recovery windows. The same way muscles require rest cycles. Without enforced friction, the organism stays in coherence mode indefinitely. Truth must be regrounded in reality. Digital ecosystem generate counterfeit truth mechanics. Likes follow parasocial intimacy, algorithmic validation. These signals activate the truth system without providing the stability that truth requires. To rebuild coherence, truth must be anchored in slowness and verifiability. Local communities, repeated interaction, embodied reputation, stable relation cycles. The metronome cannot operate on digital trust. It requires analog credibility. This does not mean rejecting online life, but grounding it in coherent offline baselines. A society's cognitive health depends on how many of its trust loops are physically real. Identity must shift from performance to structure. Identity becomes unstable under hypersynchronization because it is constantly remirrored by infinite digital signals. To rebuild coherence, identity needs fewer mirrors, slower feedback, bounded narratives, stable rules. This is not about conservatism, it is about neuromechanical integrity. An organism cannot update its self-representation thousands of times per week without losing internal anchoring. Identity coherence is equal fewer input, stronger internal models, slower narrative cycles. This can be engineered through stable educational trajectories, long horizon apprenticeships, role continuity, predictable community structures. A metronome cannot regulate a society if individuals within it have no stable internal rhythm. Institutions must regain temporal sovereignty. The digital attention ecosystem forces institutions to respond at speeds they cannot survive. To restore coherence, institutions must regain the right to decide their tempo, refuse real-time reaction, operate in slow, high-fidelity cadence, treat digital pressure as noise, not mandate. This requires structural shift. Courts given multiple weak attention shields, scientific institutions buffered from political virality, media cycles separated from policy cycles, mandatory cooling periods before mass decisions. Tempo sovereignty is not luxury, it is the only way the metronome can maintain consistent timing against external acceleration. Narrative repair requires constraint. Narrative currently behave like parasites because they spread uncontrollably. Narrative coherence requires engineered constraint, limited update frequency, bounded frames of discourse, structural anchoring in physical reality, prohibition of infinite mutation. This can be achieved through long-form institutions, literature, public lectures, slow media, unified national curricula with stable core knowledge, multi-generational narratives that resist short-term virality, public discourse anchored in explain first, react later norms. Narratives are the timing signatures of society. If narrative mutate too quickly, the metronome cannot hold rhythm. Digital ecosystem must become coherence friendly. Current platforms are engineered for speed addiction, emotional intensification, competition for attention. To rebuild the metronome, digital systems must be re-architected for pacing, stability, low amplitude emotion, high fidelity information, friction-driven interactions, coherence-first design. Examples: feed that slow down when emotional load spikes, comment sections that enforce delay, algorithmic suppression of outrage, volatility, coherent scoring layered on top of virality scoring, identity verification to anchor signaling to real social cost. This is not censorship. This metabolic safety engineering. The individual as metronome node. A coherent society is not a mass synchronized blob. It is a network of stable rhythmic nodes. Each individual must cultivate deliberate velocity control, slow reading, slow thinking, slow interpretation, boundaries against hypersignaling, periodic detachment from digital synchrony, embodied rituals, exercise, community meals, physical hobbies, stable relational cycles. The organism must shift from constant reaction to stable oscillation. Personal coherence is not moral virtue, it is biological hygiene. The civilizational blueprint. The rebuilding the metronome is not about nostalgia, ideology, central planning, technophobia. It is fundamentally about tempo engineering. A coherent society limits signals speed, stabilize trust cycles, build slow institutions, anchors identity, filters narratives, constraints algorithms, protects recovery windows, and restore rhythm to the organism. The future is not high tech or slow tech, it is right tempo. A civilization survives when its nervous system and its reality operates at the same speed. When the metronome returns, the noise stops feeling like collapse. It becomes calibrated again, interpretable again, human again.